Morning. No, good afternoon. We're already through. It's been that kind of a day already, hasn't it? I was just admiring our deputy, what are we, the deputy secretary for multimodal was walking through with her construction cone orange jacket. I think that's so on brand for NCDOT. We like to say that is the color of progress. Thanks for letting me call you out, Julie. My name is Lisa Mathis, and I am the NCDOT board member for Division 8. I like to call it the Great Division 8, right here in the center of the state. My division engineer is right there in the back. Wave your hand for me, Ruben. Yes, if anybody has any questions about what's happening in Division 8, that's the man you go to as soon as this is over. I am also the chair of the multimodal committee for the board, which includes rail. Yay! Which is why we're here today. Welcome to the Track Ahead, Economic Development and Revitalization by Rail. We have an exciting presentation for you today with rail and transportation experts spanning the East Coast. They're going to discuss how communities large and small can prepare for rail, holistic multimodal transportation hubs, and functional systems that promote economic development and benefit their residents, cities, and states. As we get started, I wanted to make sure you have all downloaded the event app sponsored by Witherill Engineering. And I'd like you to search for Attendee Mobile. You can search for that app on any of the app or Google stores. Within that app, search 2024 NC Transportation Summit. And once you log in, you can customize your profile. I look forward to checking out all the fun pictures that you post later. Get the details on the summit. That includes sessions, speakers, sponsors, maps, and more. You can create a personalized agenda and join the conversation with other attendees. A reminder to everyone that's posting to social media throughout the summit, please use the hashtag NCTranspo2024. That will help us keep all of the summit-related posts together, make them easily searchable, and it helps others find your post. For those of you who are logging professional development hours, a self-reporting form will be sent out by Huseman & Associates for attendees who have registered and checked in. So now we're going to go ahead and get started, and I would like to introduce our panel's moderator, our very own NCDOT Rail Director, Jason Ortner. Welcome, Jason.
Thank you, Board Member Mathis, and good afternoon. The session after lunch, always a challenging session to make sure everybody stays awake. But I do have good news for you. We've got three exciting panelists one from North Carolina, one from Florida, and one from Maine. So we've got some great, all up and down the East Coast. I think we've got the entire East Coast covered here. And it is exciting what they have to bring to our presentation today. To make sure you're in the right presentation, we're in the Track Ahead, Economic Development and Revitalization by Rail. You know, tying land use and rail together and creating exciting things. Many of you have heard, unless you've been living under a rock, about the $1 billion federal grant that NCDOT's Rail Division was awarded in December of 2023, as well as the 7 corridor ID selections that were done in our state, the most in the country. And we're so excited to continue to be improving and expanding the intercity passenger rail network across North Carolina, but there are many components to a successful rail project beyond just building the tracks. And I'm an engineer and I like to build tracks, but I can tell you that in this program, working with the communities has been one of the most exciting things that we have done. Our three panelists today are here to discuss those components, their experiences and perspectives about how planning, priorities, and transit-oriented development can support not just a rail project, but the mobility, the economic development, and the revitalization of an area overall. I have three panelists, and I'll go ahead and introduce them all at one time here, and then we'll bring them up individually. Patricia Quinn is somebody I work with very closely for the last many years. She and I both are on the State Amtrak Intercity Passenger Rail Committee together. And we work together along with our partners at Amtrak and FR to set a national Amtrak policy, which is not easy in any kind of way, shape, or form. She has been with the Northern New England Passenger Rail Authority, NEPRA, for 24 years, becoming its executive director in 2005, and her organization operates the Downeaster Passenger Rail Service, which runs between Maine and Boston, a very successful and popular system. Yadi Fox is the assistant city manager with the city of Hickory in North Carolina. She's worked on a variety of special projects concerning infrastructure and economic development, such as the $40 million bond program that has increased to over $115 million in infrastructure and enhancements for the Hickory Trail system, a massive undertaking. An exciting part of the state, we actually, along one of our corridor ID selected corridors between Asheville and Salisbury. So a very important community working with there as well. And then finally, Kim Delaney is the Director of Strategic Development and Policy for the Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council in Southeast Florida. She has more than 25 years working with public and private interests for a variety of purposes, including leveraging public investments to optimize economic and environmental outcomes, redevelopment, complete streets, public-private partnerships, and investment analysis. Just a few small things there. Please join me first in welcoming Mrs. Quinn to the podium. Let's see if I can get you set up here.
Control L.
You're more trainable than I am. All right, I'm going to let you do that since you're the expert. There you go.
Let's see.
And then there's your
Control L. There we go. Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you so much for having me here today. And thank you, Jason, for inviting me. And I have to say, you folks are very, very fortunate that the North Carolina team, from the passenger rail standpoint, is respected throughout the country for the great things that they do and the innovation that you always show. So I guess this is not showing on the screen, it's showing on my screen, so I'm going to step aside for a quick minute. So I'm going to start off today by talking to you a little bit about our organization, because we're structured a little bit different than North Carolina DOT. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about our service, the Amtrak Downeaster service, and then I'm going to talk to you about the relationships that we have with the station communities in and around our stations. Now, first of all, just some fun facts about the state of Maine. The state of Maine is the 39th largest state in the country when it comes to mass. There are about 35,000 square miles in the state of Maine, and we have 1.3 million people. So it is not a densely populated state. Now, normally when you think about passenger rail, you think about high density, but one of the more really rewarding things about the Amtrak Downeaster is that we've made it successful over the course of the past 23 years, even though we don't live in a dense area, but we bring people from rural parts of New England, northern New England, into the economic center of New England, which is Boston. So that's been very exciting. So our mission is to deliver, NEPRA's mission is to deliver and develop and manage a passenger rail system that meets the needs of the public. We're a very small agency, and NEPRA was established by the Maine State Legislature back in the 1990s for the purposes of initiating rail service. There had been no passenger rail service for 30 years, and then to manage it, and that's what we do. My organization is very small. There are 8 of us in total, and they're the hardest working team that you can imagine. And I'm just going through as if you're seeing something exciting on the screen. I'm sorry, it's just me. But in terms of what our priorities are, passengers. So we always focus on the passenger, because in the passenger rail business, without the passengers, you really have nothing. Unlike Jason, it's a little bit different. I'm not an engineer, so I like the people part. Let's see. There we go. Partnerships is the other thing. We have a lot of partnerships. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. Performance. We're a very data-driven organization where we set targets and goals, and we strive to meet them, reporting to our board of directors, as I think I said was appointed by the governor of the state of Maine. We do the promotion for the service. We manage a number of projects, not to the extent of North Carolina, but right now we have about $60 million in capital projects going on to extend double track, add frequencies, and public benefit. And this is really what I think is the most relevant part about this discussion today, because we're here to serve the public. Again, as I mentioned, Maine is a small state. There's 1.3 million people in the state, and about 600,000 people ride the train every year. But Passenger rail requires public funding, and everybody pays taxes, and not everybody gets to ride the train. So we're very focused on providing public benefit. So everything that we do has that focus, and so we're very, very connected to our station communities. The Downeaster itself makes 5 round trips every day between Brunswick and Boston, over 143 miles of track, using 3 Amtrak train sets. We operate at speeds up to 79 miles an hour. And again, we carry more than 500,000 passengers. And since we started in 2001, the Downeaster has transported more than 9 million riders, the equivalent of 701 million passenger miles, and we've generated $145 million in ticket revenue. And that little guy there is my grandson. So in terms of the partnerships, we hold the operating agreements with Amtrak to operate the service. We work closely with CSX Transportation, our host railroad, on projects. The MBTA in Boston owns the last 36 miles into North Station. We also manage food service. Nextine is our food service contractor. We're the only Amtrak train in the country that has privately operated food service, and the station communities. So, and the interesting business model for the Downeaster when we started 23 years ago was that we don't own or operate any of the stations. And the communities were asked when the service was being restored, who wants to have a station? They were evaluated, determined where the stations were going to be along the railroad. And those communities, when they signed on to have the station, NEPR built the platforms, but the station communities were required to build any passenger amenities and create all the services in and around the stations, which we're going to talk about today. So again, most of the Downeaster stations are owned and operated by the communities, with the exception of Portland Station. They're staffed by volunteers or paid volunteers, and again, all of these are not Amtrak personnel, they're not NEPR personnel. These are people that are representatives of the community, and having the station communities involved in the service, they really have some skin in the game, and they really want to make the service work, and it's enabled us to work with each of the station communities to really help them meet their goals and objectives. I talked about how we're performance-oriented, but we really work with the station communities. Are they interested in tourism? Are they interested in housing? Whatever it is, and we help work with the station communities to build the kinds of projects and support their development initiatives and provide the transportation connectivity. So I'm going to show you today some of this, all of our station communities, and tell you some of the stories around how they have come into be and develop. So this right now, we're going to talk about the impacts on station communities, and we're going to begin in Brunswick, and Brunswick is our northernmost station. And this is the site of the Brunswick station, and this is what it looked like in 2009. It was a brownfield site located between the downtown and a college. And there was absolutely nothing there, and there was a vision to establish a passenger rail service there, and we were going to put the station there. And a private developer came in and took a gamble and built up this site and provided space within his site for a train station that is now staffed by volunteers. And one of the, and we still stay engaged with this, but I know this is a lot of writing here, but Hillary Rocket, who's the development director for his organization, said, "Our positive experience in Brunswick taught us that accessibility to a train service is such a bonus for local communities, and it instantly turns a development into a hub of activity." And that's what that looks like today. That's that very same spot, where there's a mixed-use development, there's retail, there's a couple restaurants, there's actually a condo that you can't see. There was an office building on the site, that one in the back corner, that they moved the town offices there, and this whole area that was a brownfield site is now a complete hub of activity. Moving down the line to Freeport. Freeport was a retail mecca. It's the home of LL Bean, and lots of shops. Well, I know this is going to come, and the service is done well. They're stopping in Freeport. It really hasn't gone gangbusters. We thought initially a lot of shoppers, but not so much. But since COVID, these retail mecca, these retail hubs have had to change and kind of reimagine themselves, and that's exactly what's going on in Freeport, Maine. This is a community that's being reimagined to take what was a village, and then they converted them into retail stores, and now they're looking at converting them back to housing, to have in-town housing 18 miles outside of Portland, with the rail station being very much a part of their community, with the condos and apartment buildings that are being built adjacent to the station, and we're very actively involved in their comprehensive plan as they reimagine their community. This is the site of where the Portland Station is on Thompson's Point. You can see this little peninsula there, which for decades was basically a wasteland. There was nothing there, a couple old buildings, warehouses that were dilapidated old buildings. The train station was relocated there in 2001. A private developer came along about 15 years ago and started investing, refurbished the old buildings that were there and restored them into beautiful venues for weddings and meetings and conferences. The Children's Museum of Maine moved from downtown Portland out there with a beautiful facility you can see. They have a pavilion that was actually an old train shed, believe it or not, where they host outdoor concerts, and in the wintertime it's an ice skating rink, and they've really taken this area that was nothing there but a lot of dirt and dilapidated buildings and turned it into a hub of activity. The next station is Old Orchard Beach, and we're very lucky to have a station that is right on the beach. So the train stops, people get off with their chairs and their umbrellas, maybe a cooler, and walk out, and they're able to spread their blanket and lay on the sand for the day. There's an amusement park there. But since the train started serving Old Orchard Beach, there's also been a lot more housing that's developed in and around those station community, that community. So people, it's more of a year-round community than it was. Our ridership continues to grow in that community, and it's seasonal service. In fact, for the season of 2024, it started just yesterday, May 20th. But every year it's extended longer and longer because the season it used to be just from Memorial Day to Labor Day, and now we extend it to about November 1st because people are coming and staying longer. Businesses are able to stay open longer because the train service comes in and out. This is Saco, Maine, Saco and Biddeford, two communities next to each other, separated by a river. And you can see in this picture here, these are mills. And when the station is down in the front, you can see the train there and that big mill. Over 1 million square feet of space in that mill that was abandoned for more than 25 years. The windows were busted out of the place. Nothing was there. Over the course of the last 10 years, that mill and the ones surrounding it have been transformed into the modern apartments that are filled with a waiting list, with all kinds of development going on all around the area. There's a pedestrian bridge, like I said, two communities that are separated by the Saco River, a pedestrian bridge to connect the train station over the river to Biddeford is being planned. Parking garages have gone up. Again, old buildings have been restored and refurbished, and new buildings have gone up to support this is actually one of the fastest growing communities in the state of Maine. In Wells, the station is kind of a park and ride. It's a little bit out of the way, but NEPR has a grant and some plans. There's 2 tracks here and 1 platform, and we have a grant underway where we're going to be building a double platform at this station, and we're going to add service so that we can bring more people into downtown Portland in time for the workday. Dover is in New Hampshire. It's another city that's on the rise, which has seen tremendous growth in housing, retail, commercial, a thriving nightlife and restaurant market because it's not far. It's about an hour and a half outside of Boston, so people move here, live in a rural New Hampshire community, and commute into Boston for work. Here's some of the development that's going on there. They also have a vibrant waterfront. Durham, New Hampshire. This station is located in the middle of a college campus in the University of New Hampshire. We recently, a representative of the university gave a talk at an advocacy group organization meeting. But one of the things that he really focused on was saying that having the train there has really improved the relationship and fostered more partnership between the university and the town, that they always kind of had their own initiatives and their own mindset about how things were going to work, but that the train has really brought the town and the university together to plan better, to collectively attract people, attract business, and meet their goals. Exeter, New Hampshire is a very, very rural community. It's a bedroom community to Boston. They've recently completed, it's a little bit outside of town, so they've had to go and update the sidewalks and walkability, but are very focused on improving walkability and access from the station to the downtown area, and actually have a committee together to build a station. Haverhill, Massachusetts, as we're getting closer into Boston, has seen tremendous growth along the waterfront here with new condos coming in, again, so people can get on the train and take it into Boston. Woburn's our next station, which is kind of a commuter hub. And then, of course, 88% of the people who ride the Amtrak Down Easter travel to or from Boston. I mean, this is where folks are going. We don't have as much interim travel that people are going in this hub in Boston. And I can tell you, when the service started in 2001, North Station in Boston was somewhat of a bummer. It was underneath the Boston Garden. There were no amenities there except a McDonald's. There were 3 benches and lots of pigeons. And today it's a thriving, multi-story complex, entertainment, residential, the concert venue, the Boston Celtics, the Boston Bruins. The train goes right underneath the stadium, so you can literally go to a Bruins game in the middle of the winter and never have to go outside. So we've seen development on the small scale, on the large scale, but it doesn't just happen in big communities. It happens in small communities. And it's really about thinking about what your goals are, working with your partners at NCDOT, and really being thoughtful and planning to provide access by car and parking, access by pedestrian, how people are going to get to you, how people are going to get from your station to where they're ultimately going. But this has been a really exciting project, not just because of the train and the ridership that we've had, but to see these communities transform over the course of the last 23 years has been extremely rewarding, which is why I say, Amtrak Down Easter is a very popular train service. We have among the highest customer service rankings in the country, but it really is, passenger rail is really much more than just a train ride. So thank you very much, and I'm happy to answer questions later.
Exciting. All right, let's see if I can get this next one up. All right, Yadi, are you ready to wow us as well? Okay.
Hello, everyone. My name is Yade Fox, and I'm with the City of Hickory. I'm an assistant city manager there, and I've been there for the last 20 years. So the story I'm going to tell starts way before me, but the latter part of it, I have been able to watch this thrive over the last few years. So if you're not familiar with the City of Hickory, we are about an hour, a little over an hour away from here. We are an hour east from Charlotte and an hour actually, it's an hour west from Charlotte and an hour east from Asheville, so we're perfectly nestled right in there. So this is just a little bit of history in Hickory. So you can see passenger rail actually has been around in the Hickory area since the late 1800s. It was actually 1888. The Hickory Station, which is where people would get the tickets, was actually open for business in November of 1912. And so one of the things that happened over the years was in the 1960s, we saw some of the passenger rail actually leave Hickory, but we've always maintained active freight line. And so that's something that goes right through the heart of our downtown. Now, we all experienced some of the recessions that happened, and our region itself actually got a massive hit. So just to kind of put it in perspective, Hickory is in 3 counties. We're in Catawba County, Alexander County, we're in Catawba County, Caldwell County, and Burt County, but our 4-county region also has Alexander County in it. During the time period when this happened, our population in the whole 4-county region was about 345,000. We saw job losses of over in the 40,000s. It was so impactful, and we also saw lots of population leaving the area. About 18 to 44-year-olds were just moving away because there were no jobs, there was nothing there. And our entire area was starting to kind of die out. And so one of the things that happened was that our leadership, our council, our city management, a lot of our staff, the community pulled together and started trying to figure out what could we do. How could we revitalize things? We went and visited probably some of your cities and looked at how several places made some huge changes to try to revitalize the growth. And in doing so, we looked at all of our master plans. We looked at how we could provide better connectivity. We ended up doing something called an Inspiring Spaces Plan, which took all of our master plans and put them together. And And so what I'm going to talk to you about is the story that happens when you don't have rail first, but you're trying to help provide that connectivity throughout the entire city. And so we ended up doing a $40 million bond referendum off of our huge master plan. And this was a huge effort because our community needed to be able to be behind it. And so thanks to our council and to the leadership that was there, we were able to kind of show why this would be impactful. And so we created a 10-foot multimodal pathway that went through not only the downtown portion of our city, but connected to a variety of other neighborhoods in the area, as well as in our $40 million package, there was a business park that we partnered with our Catawba County government as well. And so very important to let you know, the multimodal pathway was originally supposed to be 5.2 miles. Earlier, you heard Jason sharing some numbers, and what happened was we were able to take that leverage of $40 million in bond referendum and add on another $75 million in grants. We were able to do $115 million in infrastructure in just the multimodal pathway and in a business park. And we took about $5 million into the business park. The rest of it went towards the pathways, just to kind of give that little bit of perspective. And so in doing so, we were able to start seeing a lot of things change and revitalize for our community. This is the Hickory Station today. It's actually still with us. What happened was probably in about 2012 time period, it got bought by a private developer. But he is so forward-thinking. He was part of our bond initiative, and he came right up and told us, listen, if passenger rail comes back, I'm very excited about it. So what you'll see next is not only the transformation of our downtown, but the transformation of the actual Hickory Station, which is where you could buy the tickets, got transformed and revitalized. Our downtown is completely different. You can see the very wide path right next to paralleling the rail line that actually goes through the heart of our downtown. The business, of course, down on the bottom is what is the Hickory Station, and then our downtown. And this is what it looks like on the inside. These are actually photos from the Hickory Station. And so you see it's a market and a restaurant. If you ever get a chance, please go check it out. It is very good. And I can't even tell you anything I recommend because everything there is good. So if you're there, if you're wanting to try to get access anywhere else, we have a regional transit system. It's the Greenway Transit Center that actually runs in the 4-county region. It is a 3-minute walk, and you can see the little blue dotted line exactly where it's from our train station. So it's very walkable. If there's passenger rail availability there, then you can easily jump onto a bus and get to wherever you need to go, anywhere in our region. But also you can get on that multimodal pathway, ride a bike, run, walk, wherever you want to go. Also in our downtown is about 2 blocks away from the Hickory Station is one of our 2 hospitals. We've got several restaurants that have suddenly started popping up because of the multimodal pathways that have come along through the area. We've got a lot more outdoor dining that has started to develop. When we completely revitalized our Union Square, that allowed the opportunity for us to be able to expand where we did our outdoor dining. In fact, the Hickory Station has outdoor dining as well, and it's very popular there. I want to give you a few stats of some things that we saw as a generating pool of economic development. So in 2019, we used the Atlanta Beltline measurement to kind of base it on why it was important to do investments into our city, into trying to make sure that we put the infrastructure there for economic development growth to happen. And so we had these goals set that by 2035 that we would have over $500 million in private investment, that we would have 1,750 new housing units, that we would have 3,500 more people, because we had a population of roughly 40,000. And it was so stagnant for so many years. Fast forward to today, 5 years later from when we started the metrics. We have had over, and this is in a half-mile radius of the entire trail system and our business park. Over $845 million in private investment, 1,316 new housing units, and our population is now over 44,000. So we've actually exceeded every one of those goals that we had set that we were trying to achieve by 2035 in 5 years. In doing so, we've also seen and heard from many developers, many businesses that they want to come to our community, they want to use that pathway, they want to come to our region. That's what we want. The more our region grows, the better it is for us. And so we're very excited about an opportunity with passenger rail to come through, because that allows people the accessibility all throughout. One thing we started noticing as well was having a lot more downtown residential population. Originally, our downtown probably had just a handful of apartments that were available for you to live right in the heart of downtown. This is just a shot of one of the parking lots that was transformed into over 100 apartments. Down in the corner on the right is our City Hall. And kind of diagonal, you'll see an empty parking lot. That's actually got 3 stories being built there now. And then on the other side of City Hall will be another 100 apartment complex that's going to be forthcoming and starting, I believe, this fall. And then probably 2 blocks over from our City Hall on the other side of the train tracks is another 50-unit apartment complex that has also developed. It's actually been lived in now for the last year and a half. And so what we've noticed is people want to be right there with all the connections, all that availability. We've started seeing the multi-use complexes. You've got all of the housing that's up on the top, but you're starting to see some of the businesses and the retail on the bottom. And we're excited about that because that's what's making our downtown thrive. And so I look forward to the day that I can come up here and tell you a story similar to Patricia's. Probably not to that extent, because we're certainly not as large as some of those cities, but just being able to share that story will be very exciting for us. Thank you.
Excellent, excellent. All right, thank you, Yadi. And we will go to Kim. All right, Kim. All yours.
Thanks. So good afternoon. Kim Delaney from the Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council, one of Florida's 10 regional planning councils. Thank you for the invitation, by the way. And I thought there was a lot of energy in Florida, and then I came in last night, and I've met people from the NCDOT board, the staff, the development community, the contractors and consultants. The level of energy in North Carolina is fantastic. It's inspiring and it's contagious. So thank you for the chance to come and chat with you. I work for one of Florida's 10 regional planning councils. My region is the Southeast Florida part of the state. So we have about 7 million people of Florida's 21 million. My region runs from Vero Beach down to Boca Raton, with Palm Beach kind of at the center. But I do a lot of work down south to Miami-Dade and Broward in working with the rail system that operates in that part of the state, and some statewide work also. So for today's chat, I have kind of 3 pieces of information to cover with you. A little bit of the history of how we get into the TOD, or Transit-Oriented Development conversation, some of the nuts and bolts about TOD and how to make that work as a conversation topic, long-term plans with often short-term decision-making, elected officials that are working on the next re-election campaign, and your project is 20 years out. That's a hard dynamic to work through. So how we work through some of that, and then some examples about how the market's been responding to essentially how TODs kind of set the table. So a little bit of Florida history. So coming into Florida, really the state opened up in about the 1880s. There's 3 ways to get in: by boat, by wagon, or by train. And so train service in Florida was an important mode. And there was some elegance in traveling into the state of Florida until about the 1960s. We had 2 pretty active rail lines. East coast of Florida was Henry Flagler's Railroad. And then the central part of the state was Henry Plant's Railroad that took you over to Tampa. And so that changed, though, in the 1960s with the Interstate Commerce Act, the Freeway Act. Passenger rail service was actually taken off the rail lines. And so the experience changed a bit to a very auto-dominated environment. Entering the state started to look like this. This may have some familiarity in some parts of North Carolina, perhaps. In Florida, what happens is people get very angry in the roadway network, so the traveling experience was a bit different. So we really entered kind of a paradigm shift in the state to try to figure out, how are we going to balance the transportation network, grow the economy, and accommodate the influx of population. Florida's back to growing about 1,000 people a day. The state's at 21 million, like North Carolina's population. Florida's population will also double in the next 20 years or so, so 40 million people moving around a state that's very wet in some spots makes it a little challenging. So the times, essentially, they are changing, both for Florida and for North Carolina. We know that there's a series of demographic shifts that are in motion now that the transportation network tries to respond to. So Florida in particular, we have a lot of millennials and Zoomers coming in. I'm raising 2 of them, which is nice. And then we have the silver tsunami, where the state is aging so rapidly. And so what we know is that we're now at about 53% of the population is either millennials or Zoomers, and they have different travel demands and different travel expectations. The other kind of shifts that we see, and these slides will be available later. I saw Lisa trying to grab a picture. So that said, we know with respect to residential trends, of course, both states are dealing with similar trends. Buyers are looking for healthy lifestyles and walkable places. And you read that again and again. There was a point in time where the golf course walled gated community was the most desirable pinnacle of lifestyle. And what we find in Florida, and perhaps in North Carolina also, is though the buyers of those places are aging out, and man, I used to go to the country club every day for every meal, but I really want variety. I want authentic experiences. I want a walkable setting, and I want a 5-minute walk to coffee. And that can't be accomplished in the walled gated condition. And so those buyers are shifting increasingly to downtown environments and new urban environments that offer that context, if you will. And so that walkability has become a very high interest. The other trend that Florida is really grappling with is workforce housing. It's great to have lots of people moving into your state, and it's great if you own property and you want the value to rise. But if you want to maintain the sustainability of your place, if you have to drive to qualify, right? That classic adage about affording housing. If it's an hour drive to get to work, and then an hour and a half drive to get to work, and then it's not even drivable anymore. Without transit as part of the solution, we can't connect affordable housing to downtowns or places of employment, and we can't sustain the workforce in the state. In fact, there are lots of headlines that talk about the exodus of people from Florida to North Carolina because they can't afford to live in the state of Florida anymore. And transit-oriented development is part of the state's solution. Where it becomes, if we just get down to the numbers, the average statistics are that the cost of transportation is now somewhere between $850 and $900 a month for the typical family. That's a bigger chunk of the budget if you're lower income. So if you're at the affordable or workforce housing end of the spectrum, the transportation budget is now 30% of income. So if 30% of your income is transportation and 50% of your income is housing, there's not a whole lot left to put food in the fridge, and you're certainly not going to have discretionary income to support the retail that everybody wants to walk to buy a coffee or get a sandwich. So we end up in a point of conflict. And ideally, what we try to find in transportation and land use planning is kind of this panacea of the walkable city where you have a 15-minute city. That's kind of the idea, right? That's the goal. So in 15 minutes, can you walk to or bike to, ideally, the daily needs and wants that you have? To school, to work, to get a coffee, to walk your dog, to take your kid to the park, to take your kid to school, for yourself to go to school, and have a lifestyle. At least, can you do it in a short 15-minute drive? We don't have a lot of those places left, but these are kind of the aspirational ideas that we have. Pardon me. So as we shift from the car-oriented development to kind of people-oriented development, it has a really material impact on the way buildings and infrastructure is arranged on the land. And I use this illustration. This is actually one of the projects we finished in my hometown of North Palm Beach, in fact, which was illustrating the difference between kind of the car-centric land development pattern that exists today, where buildings were designed to accommodate very large parking lots between the edge of the roadway and the face of the building, versus more of a people-centric design where the buildings are shifted closer to the street and you have a better walkable pattern. In the car-centric condition, you can land an airplane in between the edge of the road and the edge of the building. So if you really want to move people back and forth between the transportation network, we really have done something wrong in that arrangement. And what we know is that transportation technology is interesting and radically changing, and electric vehicles are an increasing part of the transportation landscape. But it doesn't matter if you're Fred Flintstone or George Jetson. The vehicle that you're moving in still has to be on the transportation network taking up space, and then you still have to find a parking space when you get there. So even that shift of technology, though we gain a little bit of efficiency in spacing on the transportation network, we still don't have enough room to move all the people. So when transportation meets land use allocation, and you're a state like Florida or a state like North Carolina, and eventually we have a land scarcity that we end up challenged with, because we have to still maintain water supply. We have to move the stormwater, so you have a floodplain challenge. We have habitat needs where we want to maintain species diversity. So you end up shrinking down to, there's only so much space to accommodate the people in the cars. And how they're accommodated has everything to do with how much land we have left for quality of life needs. So again, 48 people on the roadway network in cars take a different amount of space than them on bikes, and a different amount of space than transit vehicles. And again, it doesn't matter what type of vehicle you're in. If it's a single occupant vehicle, it's still going to have that same space demand. So increasingly in Florida, we're focused on transit-oriented development, as has been the theme of conversation on the panel. And most of you are already familiar with the characteristics of TOD, but just in case you're not, TOD is a good walkable environment. It doesn't have to be particularly urban, although good urbanism is part of how buildings are arranged, where parking is located, and how streets are ornamented, if you will, for the pedestrian realm. Every transit trip starts and stops as a pedestrian. So if you're getting off the bus or you're getting off the train, ultimately there's a pedestrian journey to be made. The longer that pedestrian journey feels good to the person, the further we stretch out the economic benefit of TOD. So if you have a gridded roadway network and you can stretch out the transportation trip on foot, you stretch out the value for TOD and better access to the station. TOD is context sensitive, so there's not a one-size-fits-all. There's a right-size TOD scale that makes sense in Maine or Massachusetts along the Northeastern, and in Hickory, and there's a right-size context, there's a right context for TOD in an urban downtown, in a Charlotte, in a Raleigh, or in some of the examples that I'm going to use. With respect to the mobility menu in Southeast Florida, there are two rail services that exist in the region where I work. And so Brightline has gotten lots of headlines lately. So Brightline is a premium transportation service that runs on the old FEC corridor, or Henry Flagler's corridor. It has 5 stations in my region between West Palm Beach and Miami. It is a European traveling service, a European style service if you've ever traveled on rail in Europe. The cars are automated, they're beautiful. They have food and beverage service on board. It's like a regional rail service, if you will. It's sexy and cool. It's not commuter rail, though, but it has a huge land use impact because the stations are so unique and they're well designed. Parallel to Brightline is Tri-Rail, which is a public transportation service. It's a commuter rail with 18 stations and 72 miles. So this map on the screen illustrates those two services, and they run parallel to one another. The green line on the East Coast is where Brightline runs. Those yellow boxes are the Brightline stations. And then the other line, which is the Western line, is the public Tri-Rail service. Ultimately, Tri-Rail wants to extend onto the FEC corridor or that eastern corridor as well. So this is kind of the veracity of rail infrastructure in the region. Both tracks are double-tracked, so if you're interested in that piece of it. Tri-Rail runs 7 days a week. It carries about 5 million people a year, about 16,000 a day now, which is 1 lane of traffic on the interstate. That's a statistic I use often because it's interesting when you have TOD conversations. There are some users who really want to ride the train. And man, they just want more cars, they want more service, they want easier access and cheaper tickets, and they'll be on the train. There's a larger group of users who are just happy all those people are on the train and they're not on the roadway network in front of them. And so Tri-Rail really caters to each of those audiences in different ways. So that said, in addition to commuter rail and premium rail, there's also, of course, a range of local transit options, local bus, regional bus, ride sharing, downtown trolleys, a lot of electric vehicles, and even a new autonomous trolley, not in the heart of the downtowns, but autonomous trolleys that are on the horizon. So, and then there are all the micro-mobility and personal mobility options. So we have kind of that whole array, if you will. And so with that background, the interesting question for the panel presentation for today is, how's the market been responding? And so I have two examples to share. One is an urban downtown, and the other is a suburban setting, because I thought those were two good point-counterpoints. I don't have any rural examples to use in Southeast Florida anymore, but maybe one day we will in the western parts of the county. So that said, West Palm Beach was actually the hometown of one of the audience members. West Palm Beach is one of the examples. West Palm is a full-service downtown on the coast across from the town of Palm Beach. The profile imagery there gives you an example of the scale, and the downtown ranges from 1- and 2-story fabric in the neighborhoods around the heart of the downtown to, I think the largest building is now 35 stories, and it's about 120 units an acre. So that's kind of the range in density, if you will, from about a 3 to 4 DU per acre condition to 120 units an acre. Downtown West Palm Beach has a really broad range of transportation options. It has 2 stations in the heart of the downtown, a Brightline station, and 3 blocks away is a Tri-Rail station, in addition to downtown trolley, downtown circulators, bike share, pedicabs, and plenty of ride sharing. So for the discussion today, I just focused on the Brightline station just to kind of narrow the focus a little bit. So with respect to the Brightline station, here's the station. It's not the most attractive angle, actually. It's the wrong profile, I realize. So, but that said, the station is located along the track. Where's the TOD? This is all new TOD that's come in since the station was built. The challenge in this condition is affordability, because the market wants to bring much more expensive housing than we really need, frankly, as a region. And so the struggles with affordability are the new challenge. It's kind of like a great problem to have in a lot of ways, because we don't have to convince the market to come in. We just have to structure the regulatory environment to make sure that at least 10 to 20% of what's coming in is affordable to the people who work in the downtown. These are typically $2,000 for a 1-1 and up from there. But that said, the market certainly has responded. Looking across the street from the station, again, here's the station. The new TOD that's come in around the station is pretty substantial, and increasingly now becoming affordable because the regulatory environment is now requiring that. With respect to whether or not investment leads to TOD, clearly you can't even see the station anymore 5 years after it was built, given the investment that's come in. So the other example is Palm Beach Gardens, which I think is an interesting example for North Carolina especially, because this is the suburban to urban transition. And this is one of the toughest conversations to have with elected officials. What's typically tough in Palm Beach Gardens is that it is a remarkably successful city. Median home value now is $750,000. It was the home of the PGA in Palm Beach Gardens until it just relocated to Texas, but still, Palm Beach Gardens has the highest number of golf courses per capita in the state of Florida and one of the highest in the United States. So it's a very high income community. It has a very well-defined and curated quality of life. And it's a location that really doesn't need to do anything else because it's so successful just with the residential product that it puts out there. And so this is some of the profile imagery of what the typical Palm Beach Gardens condition looks like. But the city looked ahead and realized that without better transportation options, it wasn't going to be competitive. And I have tremendous respect for a community that's willing to do that, because the dollars coming in already pay for all the services they need, but the long-term condition really was going to be the challenge for the city. So, with respect to Palm Beach Gardens, for 20 years, the city has been working with its partners. The Regional Planning Council has been part of that group in understanding land use conditions, looking at the employment along major corridors, surveying employees to learn 95% drive their own car. I was doing survey work for the city actually in 2008 And the economy was faltering a little bit, and the price of gas had really skyrocketed. It was $4.25 a gallon, I think. And so I was interviewing the owner of a Dunkin' Donuts, who's on one of the major corridors, and to understand, like, well, where are people driving in from? Well, they're driving in about an hour. Well, they're working in Dunkin' Donuts. How do you get them to drive an hour? Well, I give them a gas card with their paycheck, and that's how I get them to work every day. That's not a sustainable condition. And so the city really dove deep into understanding the economic opportunities correlated with transit. It's identified a train station right in the heart of the city along one of the major transportation corridors. It is designed as a tri-rail and a bright line station. This happens to illustrate tri-rail, but both trains will run on that corridor. And an example of what the infill pattern may look like, and this is from their master plan, images on the right are existing condition of a pretty suburban condition, right? But the infill pattern is, one that has a lot of opportunity. There's a lot of vacant empty parking lots that can yield a different economic revenue with other uses. With respect to how has the market responded, the station location is in that star over there, and it's at the crossroads of the interstate, 995, and the major east-west corridor, which is a 6-lane roadway. So kind of today condition, and here's what's coming. There's so much development activity coming into the city, they can't even process it all. So they have contract staff helping with the planning. The condition, what's getting built on the ground. This is, by the way, this is the OD happening before the T. There's no train station here now, and there's probably not a train station here for at least 7 years, but the market is getting ready for that. So this is some imagery of what's being built now. Those are profile images on the right. On the left is new workforce housing that's coming in, which does have a 10% requirement. So 10% of the 3,400 new units that have been built are actually workforce in the vicinity of the future station location. Kind of across the street from this station, examples of the scale of the development that's coming in. So, and a few more with respect to lower scale garden style apartments being converted to pretty much a 4 to 6 story program. That's about the density comfort level. 36 units an acre is the max that you can do. The condition was 12 units an acre just 4 years ago, and now they've gotten to 36 units an acre. The market is hungry for more, but we'll see where that takes the city. I should mention that the City of Palm Beach Gardens was just profiled by FHWA as one of the national case studies. So this is a link on this page to the case study paper that was published that really details the process the city went through, the regulatory changes that it undertook, and how the market's responding. So, and then just a couple takeaways. So I have just 6. One is TOD needs champions. What do we know? So if you don't have champions like a Lisa Mathis and a DOT board that has vision, it's hard to have the conversation with elected officials that are very comfortable in the existing, with the existing environment. With respect to TOD, what we would say is welcome to the suburban to urban shift. That's really how TOD works most effectively. That gets scary for a lot of people because they're used to having all that space to drive quickly down the road and drive 500 feet to the front of Walmart to the destination along the roadway edge. But if all the cars are happy all the time, pretty much no one else is, and we don't have enough space, at least in the state of Florida, to expand all the roadways as much as we need to move all the people that are coming. So that efficiency shift, we think, is high priority, and our elected officials do as well. With respect to TOD, don't aim low, aim high, because the market will oversupply TOD with rail investment. I was having a conversation with another staff member from Charlotte, actually, about the relationship between transit investment and market response. It's a 10-to-1 ratio in investment for rail versus bus. Developers don't trust that a bus line won't be relocated, but once there's capital investment in the ground, developers are willing to rely on that. So especially where there's a future rail infrastructure or capital investment at that scale, the higher the threshold that you're comfortable with, we think the better condition will be long term. It takes 2 or more to tango. Every development approval is a public-private partnership. And we think about public-private partnerships very specifically. It means local government came in with this many dollars to leverage private investment. But really, every development approval is a public-private partnership because land use regulations have a financial incentive and a financial benefit to the developer. So it's always a partnership. And TOD, of course, expressly so. If you build the grid, you build your value, because if you have a limited grid, Florida it's interesting. In the urban core, we have the 400 to 600 foot block dimension, which is the classic block dimension that makes for a walkable block. As you move west, we have 1 mile grid spacing. Nobody's walking a mile. Nobody's walking a half mile. And so that condition, the lack of a grid, really limits the utility of the transit investment. So the better a grid you can build, the better you spread the value. And then finally, the OD comes well before the T. Setting the stage like Hickory is doing to make TOD successful when it comes in is the way that TOD is the most sustainable. So that said, there's contact info. And thank you.
Wow, that's a lot, isn't it? Great presentations, just super interesting information, and great lessons for North Carolina, I think, in every one of those presentations. A bit of context, it's interesting, there's both some parallels and some differences. Obviously, Kim's community has got sort of a lot of things going on there with both intercity passenger rail provided by Brightline, as well as commuter service by Tri-Rail on 2 separate systems serving the community. So you actually have multiple areas that you're developing through those systems. Patricia's system is about 143 miles long, and it connects communities through 3 different states through that intercity rail product. And then, of course, Hickory is looking forward to a future service that would be on a 140-mile corridor connecting Salisbury and Asheville. Connecting communities all along the western part of our state. So just a bit of context, but they're all leaning into TOD as part of their planning and working and engaging both within their community and in communities up and down their corridors. We're going to move into some questions right now. So we really like to make this super engaging. Liz will handle here the microphone for us here, and so we'd like to take some questions. So just by raising your hand, who wants to be first? Anybody? All right.
Great presentations. Thank you so much. I'm Wendy Jacobs. I'm a county commissioner in Durham. And I'm wondering, because a lot of this is about public-private partnerships and about the market, getting involved. And I remember Kim, had the pleasure of hearing Kim on a RTA tour to Southeast Florida. And from what I remember in that trip was that there is a plan, a master plan that has been adopted by many different counties. So I'm wondering with each of you, what is the importance of having that long-term vision or a plan that everyone has bought into, so that I can see developers or communities making a huge financial commitments to stations or TOD before maybe the service isn't even there. So I'm wondering how important is that, knowing that commitment to that plan or the creation of that plan, also to outlive elected officials? I'm just curious about that.
That's a great question. Kim, why don't we start with you and then just go down
Sure.
the panel?
Sure. Thanks for the question. It's a great question. So what we see in working with communities is there's always this tension between the demands on elected officials who have, by nature, shorter-term checkpoints, right? Because the re-election campaign is 2 to 4 years. And transportation infrastructure investments, for example, that are going to be 10 years out or 20 years out. They might not only not be in office at that point, they might not even be using the investment that they're voting on. And so what we see is the benefit of working with the investors, the community, and the elected officials from an educational standpoint about sustainability for the community. So economic competitiveness, increasingly what we see is the most successful in places that have integrated transportation systems that are multimodal. The models that we use for the communities in Southeast Florida always lean towards those places that have connectivity, walkability, a variety of housing services, and higher quality of life. And so we use really an educational lens to work with the elected officials to kind of stretch out the planning horizon. They're legacy projects, and that's a challenge for elected officials. But we find the most success in doing that. Heavy on education and examples of those places they aspire to. Pardon me, they aspire to.
I'm going to move this a little closer just because I'm a little short. So in Hickory, we focus a lot on regional planning. And so we work a lot with our regional COG to make the efforts for when passenger rail is coming through our region, how are we all going to benefit from that? And so everyone is trying to work together to make sure that we're getting prepared. There's so much excitement in different communities all throughout our region about that connectivity. And so in doing so, that's where we want to be. And so as Hickory has been doing our own planning, we've noticed the entire region is doing the same thing. We've been very excited about that. Other cities in our county, but as well as other cities in the neighboring counties are all starting to do a lot of revitalization. There's a lot more trails being built everywhere. We're doing additional connectivities to some other cities where we're partnering with neighboring cities both in Catawba County, Burt County, and Caldwell County, working on a variety of different grants to be able to do that connectivity. So while there's not one big massive plan, there's that initial goal and priority of let's get everybody connected together. Let's all grow together. What are the things that we can do? And what we've noticed is the developers are seeing that. The people that are building the homes are seeing that, and they're wanting to be a part of that. They're targeting those areas that are having those same kind of connectivities and those same kind of discussions.
And I think building on both of those 2 points, I am the T in the TOD, so our role is a little bit different, but it's continual education, and we try to, again, we're not municipal planners, we're the railroad, and we're going to keep running every day, and what the communities do really impacts the success of our operation, and then how can we tailor our operation to support those initiatives. So we actually have convened, and we've done this for decades now. We have bi-monthly meetings with all of the 12 communities along our route where we get folks together so they're always engaged with us. They know what our plans are. They know what each other's plans are. And we try to be the glue that ties them together so that they can learn from each other and they can make those plans and understand what works in different communities, know about what the service brings, what the demographics are. So our role in this is really the education of people, and it's ongoing. I mean, it has to be done back to the point. Elected officials come and go, councils come and go, town managers come and go, but having these, encouraging the plans and the long-range planning, and then we also engage with the communities and participate in their long-range planning efforts, just to make sure that what they're doing we can support it by the service, and that they're also planning for serving our riders when they get off of the train.
Great answers. Wow, what great panelists, right, today? More questions. Yes.
Thank you so much for the presentation. Also from Durham here, Carl Riston, the Durham City Council. I also grew up in Fort Lauderdale, so Kim, I was loving your slides. It was wonderful. My question is for you. So I growing up in South Florida, I know what the roads look like and what transportation looks like. So can you tell me, the station there in Palm Beach Gardens was amazing, or the one that's planned, right? Can you talk more about the connectivity in Palm Beach Gardens to that station, like sidewalks, bike trails? Like, what does that look like, and how do you improve that connectivity so people can get to that station in the future without necessarily driving a car?
Sure, that's a great question, and actually, it might be interesting to check out the case study that FHWA did. I'll summarize that, but it's like 11 pages, and they really did a phenomenal job. So Palm Beach Gardens, it's really interesting to watch what happens there. Successful suburban place that really does a lot of engagement with the citizenry. So every year they put out a survey, and they ask citizens, what are the things you love, and what are the things that really frustrate you? The number one frustration is traffic, right? Because everyone wants to go to the hot restaurant or the cool shop, and they can't get there because all the people that are working there are driving there, and then the roadway network is filled. And so with traffic as the number one concern of residents for years and years, the city developed a mobility plan, a citywide mobility plan that was adopted about 3 years ago. That mobility plan is, it aspires to have the Hickory Trail, right? It's a system of 10-foot multi-use paths completely interconnecting the city, really innovative cycle tracks, protected intersections, mid-block crossings in the places where it needs to happen. Wonderful partnership with FDOT. The Florida Department of Transportation, of course, on state roadways, it's a much higher standard when it comes to pedestrian intersections, if you will, and accommodating cyclists than the city's roadway network. So the city had a lot of latitude to do some really creative things. If you've ever read the NACDO book, the city's doing kind of something from every chapter on the city roadway network. And then on the state roadway network, working closely with DOT to make the best conditions it can going forward with those, again, higher, more challenging connection points, if you will. So the mobility plan is a 20-year plan. They adopted a mobility impact fee, which is now available. It was just approved, in fact, by the state legislature in this last session. The League of Cities ran the bill because of Palm Beach Gardens. Palm Beach Gardens was the champion for that bill in the legislative session. And so now cities in Florida can adopt mobility impact fees. Florida's financial condition is that counties and cities can charge impact fees for development to fund approved capital infrastructure projects that are in their comprehensive plans. And so historically, that infrastructure has been somewhat limited to roadway improvements. The mobility fee allows cities to broaden that, and the mobility fee can cover the multimodal parts of the transportation network, so transit, bike, and ped particularly, as well as EV charging. I thought that was a good way to expand the network. And so the city's mobility plan centers around the future Tri-Rail Brightline station as a major hub with other hubs as well, and it's adjusted the roadway network to add connections that didn't exist. So we have walkable streets that parallel larger corridors, and then really solid bike ped infrastructure on the horizon with the ability to have trolley service long term. So that one transit investment in the form of a train station, that's a big ticket item, right? That's the gold-plated infrastructure is the train station, but if you can't get to the train station, it really never has yield. So all those other points of connectivity are how that station adds value, and that's why that map had so many parcels colored in, because every developer that's taken down every piece of land around there is banking on getting connections to that station. And so they're anticipating those multimodal connections within their own developments to make that happen. Okay? Sure. I wanted to, if I can respond just for a moment, a follow-up to the prior question, which is how do you get to long-range planning? The thing I forgot to mention is the systems approach. And when we think about transportation infrastructure, it's kind of, sometimes when we're in the transportation industry, we get a little myopic, and we're really focused on, in this right-of-way, we can do these things. And that really limits the utility of the investment, because transportation and land use live in the same house. So I took a run last night to go to dinner. I looked for the highest-rated restaurant within a mile and a half, and I ran out of the hotel and ran down the street. The relationship between land use and transportation is really extremely evident in a condition that's a repair opportunity for that, right? With lots of driveways intersecting the street, the buildings are set back pretty far, so you feel fairly exposed on the transportation network. So the systems approach in thinking about transportation and land use together, we would suggest, is the method to get to a solid long-range plan. Florida actually has a nonprofit called Thousand Friends of Florida, which is one of the good growth management groups that's out there. It's nonpartisan. It's a citizens-based group. And about 20 years ago, they put together a plan called How Shall We Grow? In fact, I was having this conversation with one of the board members for NCDOT last night. And How Shall We Grow looked at a systems approach for development in the state of Florida over 20 years. So what are the priorities that you have as a place? Well, you need clean water or you can't survive. So watersheds and water supply, kind of a high priority. People like to have critters that can survive in our place. So habitat maintenance and species diversity, high priority. So natural systems that are interconnected, that's another system, that's a layer. And quality places to live. And so on the land that's left, after you accomplish those two things, there's only so much real estate left to accommodate the people coming in. How shall we grow was a really interesting way to analyze a suburban land development pattern over the next 50 years if you spread it out like peanut butter, and we're really good at that in the state of Florida. So with low-density, sprawling conditions, we have an enormously expensive transportation network that we, one, can't afford to build, and two, can't afford to maintain. Or if you vary the growth pattern and have nodes of development that you allow to have higher density, not all of it, but at least some of it, then you have a much different responsibility in terms of transportation capital costs and transportation maintenance costs over time. And so that layered approach to planning and looking at the systems and how they tie together, we would suggest is a really effective way to get to those educational goals that we talked about in helping people see how things fit together. So the market, if left to itself, will do whatever the trend is right now. The trend right now is building easy, inexpensive, low-density housing as far as you can go. And so to help the market adjust, the regulations can incentivize different forms of development. And if you do that, and if it's equal cost to the developer will build whatever you can sell. And so we have the ability within the governmental structure to incentivize those patterns. So anyway, there you go.
Great, thank you. Other questions?
Hi, it's Jason Myers with NCDOT Rail Division. This question's for Patricia. I'm curious if there's any lessons learned that you've had in this area of development and transitory development. Maybe something didn't go the way that you would have wanted it, and looking back on that we could learn from. And if that's too pointed, then maybe just say what NEPRA would have wanted to know 15 or 20 years ago when it was just getting started that we might benefit from today.
That's a great question, and thank you. And I think it's almost, again, we're a little bit different because we, operate the train. And so we've seen the success of different communities who are forward-thinking and planning. And that's why this is really exciting, and the opportunity and the information that you have here and the encouragement to plan and to think ahead. Because the communities who thought about what was going to happen when the train arrived, thought about how to plan around it, thought about how to use that connectivity to a transportation connection to the urban center of New England, have been the ones who have thrived. Those that kind of said this is very nice and kind of let it be there have not seen. So really it's those communities, and I'll speak specifically to Dover and now even Saco Biddeford and Brunswick, who really have used the access to transportation as part of their economic development strategy and really promoted that, are the ones that have really succeeded. And I think my advice to those the other communities would be, and we do this regularly, is to really, use this as an asset. It's not just the way to go to Boston to see the aquarium twice a year, to go to Fenway Park, that this is really your connection to the economic center. So it's doing all the things that you're all doing. Again, these are many rural communities, and the numbers of people, lop a zero off in many of these cases. The average income, you can, lop some money off. I mean, these are small, really rural areas in many cases. But now things are changing. Maine is also the oldest state in the union, and so there's a real need to bring in new people. And so there's a focus on using connectivity, and as people can work and live in different places, there are really shifts in the way people are working, the way people are recreating, and how people are choosing where to live. So it's really looking at all of those things and trying to plan for that. And again, back to the comment about the systems approach, that's really important, that having connectivity to the nodes, those that have the best transportation connections are the ones that have seen the most benefit, public benefit from the investment that we've made as the rail authority in those stations. So it really comes down to partnership, and sometimes it's public-public partnership, and sometimes it's public-private partnership.
Thank you, Patricia. I have a question for you, Yadi,
Okay.
because you're obviously very successful in finding money. Um, During your bond campaign, how did you message on the multimodal investments, including those that would be present and those in the future?
Okay, so we took a huge approach whenever we first started talking about what we were going to do with multimodal transportation. The first thing we did, there comes a period in North Carolina where when you're going to do a bond referendum, the government is not allowed to talk about it. So before that happened, we had a 2-week period where we had several open houses trying to communicate with people, showing them what we were trying to do for the community, how important it was, showing them examples, really talking to them about what we were trying to do for the community. We also did in a 2-week period, I believe we had 22 different civic engagement presentations. We had over 500 people come to several of our city hall events. And as you all know, if you're in local government, it's hard to get people to come out to things. But we had to go out to go see them, but we also invited them. We did a 14-minute video that would explain what the bond referendum was actually going to do to their property tax and how that was going to impact them, at what point it was going to be certain amounts so that they would understand what that would mean and when that would impact them. Throughout that entire period, we tried to make sure that we communicated that. We also had community members that were a part of a committee that were our speaking voices, our ambassadors, if you will. Our city council also engaged with them, but it was mostly the community that was starting to spreading the language. And one of my favorite things when we were preparing for this panel that I shared with our group was, there were a lot of people that were, we had, I think 67% was what our voter total was for approving the bond referendum. And we're a very conservative community, so it had to be very strong in order for that to happen. But one of the things that was so touching for us to be able to see it work, was people that have commented, I voted against this, but now I use it all the time. I voted against this, and now I'm seeing all these things popping up all over the place. My family loves it, we love it. And you can do so many different things with multimodal transportation. Ours is not just through the heart of downtown, it's through some of the areas that are more economically challenged. It's starting to get growth in those areas. It's in some areas that were already kind of isolated because of some major roadways. We worked with DOT to kind of partner with where we're going to have a 6-lane super street coming directly through one portion of the city, and there was no pedestrian access to be able to get across. And so in doing so, we worked with them to go ahead and pre-plan for doing a pathway across it so people could safely get across, and then that way they could still get around to the community. And then we have water access too, so people were able to see that. And what's been super fun has been able to see people enjoying it, seeing the pictures all over social media. And so in doing so, it's that communication, it's that buy-in, and now you can see it starting to happen and grow naturally. And we just want to continue that throughout the entire region.
Wow, that's great, wonderful. We have time for just a couple more questions. Yes, in the back.
I heard a comment, didn't even occur to me, about the North Hills area in Raleigh. I don't want transit to come here because of the people it might bring here. I'm sure you've heard that. I'm curious how you dealt with that when you were talking with the public. I never thought of it that way. I only thought about it the positive way. We're going to bring in all the stuff that you guys have talked about, but I know you've heard that somehow it's going to connect people together. They're going to get, train stations are not clean. We don't want it in our neighborhood. So I'm just curious how you talked about that.
We direct that to Patricia. You want to take that? Talk about demographics on your train and.
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. When we started our service, there was a lot of concern about that. And there was also concern that, tourism is a major industry in the state of Maine. In fact, it's our largest industry. And there was this concern that if we had the train to Boston, that everybody was going to leave and go away and people weren't going to come. So it's all those, kind of misconceived ideas. It goes back to communication. I mean, you have to get out there, you have to listen to people. And then we've been extremely fortunate, and again, working with the station communities, maintaining a positive, pleasant environment is extremely important. Having those ambassadors at the station to welcome people and to be there and to really be part of the community. And a lot of the fears happen to go away. Sometimes it's hard to convince naysayers that it's any different. You just kind of have to show them. Also, I think with transit in particular, there's really a paradigm shift also in who's using it and why. I mean, back when I was 16 years old, I couldn't wait to get a car. Now people that are 16 and 17 years old really aren't that into a car. They'd much rather have this in their hand than a steering wheel. And so really, I think there's a new day in terms of looking at the people who are, looking at their time that they spend in transit. They want to make use of that time, so we've promoted a lot of that, and that making your time more productive by using transit, whether it be the train or it be the connecting bus services. And also, an aging population and making it very clear that it's for everybody. And now we're able to connect people who couldn't access communities before. I remember when the Downeaster started 20-something years ago, and it was a few days after the first day, and the phone rang, and I happened to answer it at our office. And it was a lady who was in tears, saying that she and her husband, who was mobility impaired, hadn't been out of the state in over a decade. And because the train was there and they were able to access it, they were able to go to Boston for the first time in a very long time. So a lot of it comes down to storytelling too. And really, in today's world, being robust with social media, being robust with your public-facing, public relations campaign. Again, you can't take it for granted. You're always going to have that, but you have to just continue to tell the good stories because the good stories outweigh the negative, and just get more people to use it, and they'll understand. Like I said, sometimes you can't change people's minds. You just have to keep moving forward. And just operate a quality service. And I think that's really been our focus as well, is making sure that the product we deliver is safe, is friendly, is clean, and that people want to use it.
Wow, great response. We have time for one last question. Anybody? Well, yes, right here in the front.
Hey, Grady McCollum with NCDOT IMD. For those of you that did the OD before the T, so to speak, how many of you guys used FTA funds for any of that, and what was that process like? How did that go for you?
Did you use FTA funds?
Yes, we did.
Do you want to speak to that? Or I can.
Go ahead, will you start?
Okay, sure.
Yeah.
Lots of FTA funds on the Tri-Rail system. And the nice thing about FTA funds now, and this is the webinar, if you're interested, FTA has a webinar it ran about 10 weeks ago, which is that if there's FTA money now in land assets, and you're going to offer those properties for development that includes a percentage of workforce and affordable housing, you don't have to pay FTA back. Tremendous leverage for transit agencies across the country now that bought land with FTA dollars, because now that's an asset you can use to leverage. There's a very strong relationship between Tri-Rail as a system and FTA, and there's lots of FTA money in their stations. The SFRTA, which operates Tri-Rail, the South Florida Regional Transportation Authority, has a very aggressive TOD program. We actually helped them draft a TOD policy with minimum development expectations, and they've been putting their sites, their properties on the block over the past 2 years. There are a couple of TOD projects they're negotiating now, and more on the horizon. So we have a long history in the region of using those assets in that way. Again, the new benefit is now you don't have to make FTA whole. So if you had $2 million of FTA money in to buy a parking lot, now you can put that parking lot out. The developer still has to replace enough parking so the station can work, but the parking numbers now are lower than they were 15 years ago. So you have a lower burden. and you have an asset you can use to get what is mostly workforce and affordable housing at the stations. Okay?
And FTA funds were used to establish and to build some of the stations along the Downeaster route, or at least the platforms, and was used to rehabilitate the track. A lot of the expansions that we've had have really been funded on the FRA side because we're Amtrak, so we're intercity passenger rail. But I think the interesting thing is that, right now through the IIJA, the Build America Bureau does have funding and low-interest loans that are available to private developers for transit-oriented development. And I have, over the course of the last couple of months, I've gotten calls from private developers all along our corridor in different states asking for our help to help them with the application process. And so we've done that too, is just introducing them, having them understand the language, what the rules are, and then being there to support their projects, and so that they can get the financing that they need to move these things forward.
Thank you, presenters, and just a round of applause for them real quick. Excellent presentations. And Board Member Mathis, back to you.
A huge thank
So
you.
I wanna
That
go
was
right
a
in Northeast,
fantastic
Easter, I wanna go to
conversation.
Hickory,
So a
go on
huge thank you to our speakers and to our NCDOT staff that helped us moderate and put this together. So thank you for that. I would also like, as we're wrapping up the session, to take a minute to thank our sponsors, NC Go and the NC Chamber, for helping us to host this year's North Carolina Transportation Summit. And thank you to all the sponsors who participated to help make this happen. If you haven't done so already, please check out the vendors in the exhibit hall. You'll see some impressive technology and wonderful companies down there on display. Also, make sure to visit NCDOT's Office of Civil Rights Business Development Zone. There's some wonderful people down there in the exhibit hall. It's a great networking opportunity for everyone. We would love to see you down there. There's also going to be another networking opportunity tonight from 5 to 7 p.m. in the exhibit hall during the reception, and that is sponsored by one of our partners, HNTB. So again, thank you for attending this wonderful session. DOT loves TOD for sure. We look forward to seeing you tonight. Thank you.